Hey guys, we are going to do Friday's, the very last, The Wild Robot video. So yesterday, I asked you guys to write down the answers to the questions that the author proposed. And today I told you I would give you mine. So here are my answers. So the first question was, how long will Roz live? I think that Roz will live for probably quite a while. However, I don't think she'll live forever on the island. One thing I know about living on an island myself, I grew up on an island, is that the sea salt from the ocean corrodes metals and makes them rust and makes them not last as long. And so we know that Roz is made out of metal. So I think that maybe the sea salt will start to corrode her body and her gears and her computer parts. And that will probably make her not live as long as robots that are in the city. And she doesn't have access to a shop or a mechanic or anything like that to fix her if she breaks. Remember when she broke, when she lived on the farm, if she broke, the dad just took her to the shop and just had her fixed. But on the island, remember when from the very first book, when the bears chased her and the bears ripped off her foot, they couldn't replace it. They had to use a rock or wood and they made rope out of something. But one thing that I did think of is that maybe they could use the other parts from the other robots that were wrecked from the very first time that Roz got there. Remember how it was the robot graveyard? She could use those to try and fix herself. So I think maybe she'll live, let's say, 50 years, 100 years. I don't know. Will she ever see another human or another robot? Nope, I don't think so. I think Dr. Malova is a woman of her word, and I think she's going to keep the island a secret. And I think she is not going to tell anybody about Roz being there. And I think that Roz will just get to live there happily ever after and not have to worry about anything. What joys and sorrows lie ahead for her? Joys, I think she's just going to have this abundant, continual love of family and friends and experiences, and helps the animals and they'll help her, and she'll just continually learn. And she learned a lot of stuff from being in the city, right? Being living there, and then reading all those books on Dr. Malova's apartment and watching humans and watching other robots. So I think she'll have some pretty cool things to bring back to the animals. I think the sorrows, though, is she's going to outlive a lot of her family and friends. She's going to live a lot longer than them. But I think the kind of interesting thing about that is they'll continually, her family will continue growing because animals will reproduce in the wild and have babies, and they'll continue to have families. And so those babies will grow up with Roz as a part of their whole life. They'll never know a life without a robot. So, I think that's pretty cool. So those are my answers to the questions. And they just kind of really make me think oh man, this is just a pretty deep book. I've had a lot of fun reading it. So there's two parts back that I want to read to you. So this is called an epilogue. This is kind of like when an author leaves a lot of questions, like he did. Peter Brown is our author, and he mentioned the very last chapter, he said, hey, I have a lot of questions, and we'll never kind of really know because this is the last Wild Robot book. But what an epilogue does is it's like a final chapter that summarizes everything that could happen. So this is the epilogue of the Wild Robot Escape. So it's going to maybe answer some questions for us. Let's find out. Autumn had returned to Hilltop Farm. The pasture was coated with frost, but the cows were out there, grazing on the last few tufts of fresh grass. Soon they'd stroll up to the parlor for another milking. Their routine never changed. Mr. Sharif was sitting in his pickup truck with his dog. The man stared out the window, across the fields, at the new robot. He was keeping a close eye on her. Tech Lab had promised him this one wouldn't run away, but he didn't trust her yet. These days, the children spent most of their free time working on the farm. Jaya had a way with the cows. Jad liked tools and the machines. They were walking through the farm buildings together when they heard honking sounds in the sky and a flock of geese glided down to the pond. For weeks, geese had been stopping by on their migrations, but there was something different about this flock. They flew in a perfect formation, and they were led by a small, graceful goose. The flock calmly floated on the water. After a while, the leader shook his tail feathers, beat his wings, and fluttered over to Jaya and Jad. The goose stood in front of the children. He gazed deep into their eyes. Then he craned his neck around, plucked out one of his feathers, and laid it on the ground at their feet. Jaya and Jad looked at each other and smiled. The children had waited for this moment for a long time. They'd always wanted to know how Roz's story would end, and now they finally knew. The wild robot was back where she belonged. So that kind of answered some of my questions about Hilltop Farm and what happened to Jaya and Jad. Maybe not what happened to them, but I always felt a little bit of sadness from Jaya that she left Jaya and Jad. Like it made me sad that she had to leave them because she had a pretty good relationship with them. And she really enjoyed being on the farm with them. Sorry, guys, I'm looking for that page where she leaves them and tells them goodbye. Do you guys remember where it was? Towards the middle, I think. Anyway, hold on. Sorry, guys. We're going to find it in just a second. But I really liked that they, that was part of the epilogue. Found it. There's Jaya and Jad hugging her goodbye. Like everybody's pretty sad, but they know it's the right thing to do and know it's for the better. And that's what she told them. Roz told them that she said, how will we know we've made it home? We need to know how your story ends. The robot muttered some animal words to her son and then said to her children, if a goose ever visits this farm and presents you with a feather, you will know that I am home. So she told them. And then I think it was pretty neat that Brightbill was the one that got to deliver the feather to them, and now they know. So now I'm going to read to you also, it's a note about the story. This is from the author, I believe, and he's just kind of telling us maybe like why he wrote it or what he felt about the story. What would an intelligent robot do stranded in the wilderness? How might a robot adapt to natural environment? Could a robot ever truly be wild? Those are some questions that inspired me to create the character named Roz and to write my first novel for children, The Wild Robot. But I had more questions. What would happen if Roz were taken away from the wilderness? How might the wild robot react to normal robots and to humans? Could she ever fit into the civilized world? These questions kept coming, and yet there was one question that I returned to again and again. Where does the wild robot truly belong? Does Roz belong on the island where she spent her first year of life? Or does she belong in civilization, working for humans alongside other robots? I imagined feeling torn between the natural world and the civilized world. I also imagined, if given the choice, Roz would choose to live with her wild family and friends. But would she have a choice? I obviously needed to explore these ideas by writing a sequel in which Roz finds her way back home. The story had to be filled with a heart and soul and action and science and even a little philosophy. I had to develop new characters and settings, and everything had to take place in the future, of course. This news story was tricky, like a puzzle where all the pieces had to fit together perfectly in order for the whole thing to work. I read expert predictions of what our future might look like. I studied robotics and automation and artificial intelligence. I began to envision a futuristic society where humans lived comfortably thanks to the tireless work of robots. And there was Roz in the middle of that society using her wilderness in new ways to escape from her life and to return to her old one. The puzzle pieces started fitting together after several years of research and thinking and writing and illustrating. And finally, I had my second novel for children, The Wild Robot Escapes. I think Peter Brown did a pretty great job with both of these books. What I like that he mentioned there is that he did a lot of research. So that means he had to study different things in order to add true details into his story. So even though this isn't a true story, right? he's still, he said he researched a lot of different things like robotics and philosophy and artificial intelligence and automation and things like that. So anyway, I have really, really enjoyed reading The Wild Robot with you guys. And stay tuned for our very next book. See you guys.
What?